Welcome back. Crypto Parabellum Podcast, episode number 4. And we still have 3 hosts. Gentlemen, last week, pretty good reviews, I felt. Joel, apart from some microphone issues, which we believe we worked out, did very well, man. Welcome back to week 2, Joel.
Let's get it. I don't think we've worked the microphone issues out, but we will get there.
All right, that works. Alan, how are you? How you been?
I'm doing well. I'm trying to recover from the last 15 minutes of my life working on Joel's microphone. But you know what? We can pull through it.
If we can get past this. All right. Well, we're gonna have a little bit of a shorter episode here because we all have hard stops in about 40 minutes, but it should be a short but good one. And I think we should just hop right into it. All right.
Sounds good to me.
So we got a couple things we're going to talk about. There wasn't anything that really blew the doors off, but I think it's worth jumping into right away. We all know that we were headed down in a bear market. The Federal Reserve started tightening or stopping the cash flow and talk about quantitative tapering, which sent everything into a down spiral. One of the obviously byproducts of that was what happened to Three Arrows Capital, which was obviously we talked about in previous episodes, insolvency, which had a massive trickle down effect. And I wanted to use this time to talk about something you guys probably have as good or better insight, and probably Alan, because I know you've looked at each of these products, but there are quite a few reports coming out that Celsius, while still active, solvent, is about to head into some pretty significant financial stress. So, Alan, I don't know if you want to set it up, but I think there's 2 elements of this. One, what Mashinsky was doing prior to the fall and where they sit right now with cash. Because what happens if these things run to fruition? So, Alan, take it away.
Sure. So maybe there's sort of 2 things to talk about here, but I suppose the first one that you talk about is how they got into the situation that they're in. And maybe we just hit that really, really shortly because we've talked about it before. But the new information about how they got into the position that they are in, this is reported by the Financial Times. So very reputable source. I think we can take away something from this article. And that is that reportedly Alex, the CEO of Celsius, decided that he was best suited to trade on behalf of the company, I suppose. And by trading on behalf of the company, you're really also trading on behalf of all of the users that have deposited to Celsius. Mm-hmm. And what they called out in this was that he was trading hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin. And he was trying to trade the Fed's actions. And so there was one specific situation that they described where I believe he sold Bitcoin prior to an announcement. The next day he was wrong and bought all the Bitcoin back higher. And so what that does is now creates a hole on the balance sheet because all of those users who have deposited Bitcoin, deposited ETH, they are still owed the same amount of Bitcoin or ETH, but you went to cash. You basically shorted just by going flat. And you were wrong. So I think, again, it just shows that what was going on behind the scenes at Celsius is more and more cloudy. And it is interesting to now see that you as Alex, you can't really write it off as, oh, we made some honest mistakes in DeFi. I think they probably did, but this is not one of those. It's not, at this point, you can't just say anymore, oh, sorry, we did our best. No, the CEO, who has no financial background, his background is starting and running companies, which is fine, but you should not be trading. That's as if Joel or I went on and traded on behalf of users that deposited with Stacked. That's ridiculous. That's not what they're signing up for. And so yet again, we find Celsius problems.
I never really thought about that as a realistic option. Is that disclosed when you deposit money? This is what we're going to do. And people just didn't read it.
Okay, so that's an interesting question. I haven't read the Celsius terms, but my belief is, and I haven't seen this for a few months since it sort of all happened, but you were giving Celsius control of your funds. They had the ability to do whatever they thought was best to earn that return. You were giving them your crypto, and in return, they were promising. I suppose it depends what you deposited, but something like 8% a year on USD. And various lower rates on Bitcoin, on ETH, that is no longer your crypto. It's basically like you gave them a loan. They're going to do whatever they want with it. But I think what makes this article different is in the maybe filings with the bankruptcy filings. So Kirkland and Ellis is sort of running their bankruptcy process. Mm-hmm. It said there that Celsius was pushed into bankruptcy, not by mismanagement, but by a broader collapse in crypto asset prices, right? So it's sort of like saying, hey, it's not our fault. We did our best, but all these other things happened, and that hurt us. But this article is the exact 180 of that statement. That is now mismanagement. Right. If you have the CEO trading, Fed rate meetings, that's mismanagement. I don't know what else you can call it.
Right.
Yeah.
Joel,
I would just add to that, the crypto prices, again, let's say that the crypto prices are what led to this decline, then the users would still have one-to-one assets. They would still have their one ETH. It would be worth 80% less, but they would still have their one ETH. So to Alan's point, they dug themselves obviously a really big hole. And now they're in the position where they're running out of money. And as a business, right, there's multiple aspects and there's multiple ways to think about the assets that Celsius has. They have cash as a company. They have crypto as a company. They have their internal token, Treasury, and then they have user client assets. And all of those numbers are all messed up, which we can get into some of the specifics in a moment. And that starts with that mismanagement. And it's not just, the market went down 80%. Again, to Alan's point, it's attempting to time the market. And the funny thing is, or the ironic thing, or maybe the unfortunate thing, is that Machinsky actually was pretty bearish at a decent time to be bearish. But it's a volatile space.
Prior to the Fed meeting in the fall. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. Like he technically had it right.
He just didn't time it great because we had that kind of exit pump, if you will, that exit scam.
Well, and the funny part about it too is like he had it right, but if you follow this, which I do as a trader, and I bet to a lesser degree you guys do as well. Usually Fed day and the day after, there's a move, and it generally has not been the move of the trend. So you're talking about that, like he sold, it went up, he bought back. It probably, if you look at those dates, I imagine not long after that, it reversed. And so like he made Trader 101 mistakes when it happened, which is pretty funny. But hold on, Alan, before you go, I just want to get these numbers out here because I think it's interesting to people that are listening. And I'm going to read this straight from the article from CoinDesk, which has like their actual balance sheet. The document also showed that Celsius's liabilities in crypto to customers surpasses $6.6 billion, while the lender only holds $3.3 billion of digital coins for a $2.8 billion difference as of July 29th. So, July 29th. So we're talking about now you mismanage your trade to the tune of down 50%, where if you just held everything 1-to-1, they would be, I mean, they probably wouldn't be the same because they were paying out yields, but it would be what? Well, it's half a year of 12%,
so
6%
you should
down?
Be like 4% off. Like, let's say, you know, you did it wrong. But sort of the nail in the coffin, or the salt on the wound to all the Celsius depositors, is Celsius still continues to send out both emails and push notifications on like Mondays or something like that. You just got paid. You earned X% in deposit rewards. It's like, are you guys idiots? Stop sending those. Yeah. Stop saying that you're going to continue to pay interest on customer deposits. You obviously can't. People, all of your dirty laundry is now out there. So you can't fake it anymore. So can we stop the emails and the push notifications every Monday?
With the amount of money they're spending still on payroll, you would think there's people overlooking the automated emails that are going out to their customer base. I mean, we saw those too. Right now, Celsius is in a point where they have $130 million in cash, but they're going to spend $137 million over the next 90 days. and that puts them functionally insolvent by October. Now, that's assuming they don't cut costs, and the majority of that cost is actually not payroll. I haven't, Alan, did they do layoffs? Do you remember anything public?
Actually,
I didn't see anything.
I don't remember. I mean, you would imagine that they have.
Yeah.
I can
Right.
tell you the people that I spoke to as Celsius reps are not there anymore. But that's just personal. Like I don't have anything to confirm that.
Yeah, I can see it right now. They show August, September, October, and what their payroll is. It declined by 30% from. It's going to decline. So they obviously did severances, which is yay for those people. It will decline by about 40% September.
And that's not going to make a difference. That doesn't make a dent. All of the money that they're
it's not
all the money they're spending is on hosting, because this is for their mining business, right? So their mining business is losing a ton of money right now, and that's a function of the market and the overall ecosystem and everything else. So yeah, it's mismanagement compounded on top of multiple black swan events, as well as the crypto market kind of going bust. You can't ask for a worse way for things to play out.
So let me ask this question, because it sounds like, barring Savior Sam coming in, which I doubt he has any intention to do, what happens? So if we fast forward to October.
Wrap it up. So stop being selfish and trying to maintain corporate value. Wrap it up. Give everyone their money back and let it play out. Like you have an extra $130 million that you're going to burn between now and 90 days from now that you could instead return to customers. You won't, right? Because you want to keep getting paid. I'm sure Alex is still getting paid. Wrap it up, close it down. Now, I don't even know that you can anymore. Now that you're in the bankruptcy proceedings, like you might not have a lot of control over what you can't do.
Yeah, probably not.
But I mean, I don't want to change the subject too much, but Voyager sort of has like the same thing. And like them, every month that they delay some type of action, a deal with somebody, a buyout, you're depleting what could be returned to customers just from operation expense.
Well, keep in mind they have their own token, right? They have a treasury where they have 658 million of their token, which is worth like $1 billion. Now, of course, liquidity and everything else, it's not. But
it's locked.
Yeah,
it's locked. I read that, and I was like, "What's funny is if that was the one thing that they hadn't actually done in a smart contract, which they couldn't manipulate, they would definitely just be dumping it right now to get themselves out." It's hilarious that the crypto, which they could not manipulate because they locked it into a smart contract, or at least some portion of the vesting, is actually keeping everyone else from getting dumped on.
Right. Well, I mean, they could dump technically, and it would just tank the price.
I don't know that they have control over any of their assets during the bankruptcy.
Well, during the bankruptcy, from a legal perspective, sure. But just talking about trying to get liquidity from assets, right? As a general part of a bankruptcy proceeding, you're liquidating assets, right? To try to generate as much cash as you can, ideally to pay back to your victims, not just lawyers and everything else. I'm sure it's building up quite a bit here. But I mean, ultimately, you're right, Alan. Like they're going to blow another couple $100 million going through some formal proceeding, only to just give hopefully the assets that they do have back to their users, which would be about a 50% loss to those users. I mean, obviously you're pretty thrilled to get 50% of your money back if since June you've thought that it was zero.
So obviously Japan is different than the United States, but just for the sake of comparison for people that know about Mt. Gox, so we just talked about, what was it, like almost $3 billion they're under, so about 50%. Mt. Gox was 500 million, and it's still being resolved. That was in 2014. 2014. Yep. It's still being resolved 8 years later. And it's through, obviously, court and different claimants and whatever it may be. Obviously, I think they had much less information about clients in 2014. But that was $500 million. We're talking about 6 times that amount. But yeah, I mean, if you had money there, what do you do?
I mean,
give me my 50%.
Sounds like you're going to wait 7 years to get 50% back, and hopefully the market 100x's by then, and all those people get rich. I mean, people, if they were getting Bitcoin now from Mt. Gox, they'd be pretty thrilled. I mean, that was a forced hodl. That was a forced hodl over 8 years. I mean, obviously, not to take anything away from the actual victims of Mt. Gox, and that's not obviously how it worked out. But one could be optimistic and say, maybe this does work out okay for the clients in the long run. I just don't understand the bankruptcy proceedings at all in this case. Looking at how bad everything is when you actually get a peek inside of their books, it's like, just instead of going through that, to Alan's point, why not just close up shop, give everyone the money back that you can, instead of dragging this through bankruptcy court for 7 years? It's going to be a mess, man.
So real quick, Alan, do you know, is Mashinsky like, I mean, you all have better insight into what's required to be an SEC sanctioned company, which clearly, they're not. But is there any indication that Mashinsky had the licenses needed to be trading that on other people's behalf?
Well,
and I asked that really as a setup of a question to say, if he didn't, this should extend beyond civil.
I think what you're asking is like, is Alex legally allowed to do what he did in terms of the trade?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Probably. I mean, we obviously aren't lawyers, but what license do people get to trade cryptocurrency, right? You're already running You're already running Celsius, which, take it from someone who runs a highly regulated business in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. Nothing that Celsius was doing, as far as I could tell, would be looked upon favorably by most, if any, regulators in most, if any, jurisdictions. So the least of his concerns was whether or not Mashinsky was deciding to trade Bitcoin, as opposed to their chief investment officer making that decision. That's small stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, and it's sort of interesting that this didn't happen, but BlockFi got a lot of SEC attention. Celsius got zero SEC attention, at least as far as I'm aware of. I haven't seen any news about that. Even now maybe the SEC looks at it as like, it's too late for, like, we don't need to get involved at this point. But it's a similar business. I won't do BlockFi. I won't insult BlockFi by saying it's the same business. It's not the same business, but they are close, right? They're both fruits. Right. It's an apple and an orange, but they're both fruits. And so why did BlockFi get SEC attention, but Celsius did not? The only thing I can think of is BlockFi was within arm's reach in the US, right? Like operating as a US company. Celsius had an office in the US. They had representatives in the US. I believe their headquarters, and I'm using air quotes, and that was Hoboken, New Jersey. So right. I don't know.
I would venture to guess the SEC is not a criminal prosecution, or a judge or a court, obviously, or anything like that, right? They're a regulating body, and the only thing that they get out of this stuff is fines. They get fees, they get money. That's how they run their business. It is a business. It's a business designed to protect consumers, but a business nonetheless that needs to generate revenue, and they do so typically on a yearly basis. 9 figures from JP Morgan and Wells Fargo and every other blue chip bank that all of us use has been fined billions and billions of dollars on an annual basis for thousands of compliance violations. It happens every single day. BlockFi had $100 million to give. Celsius doesn't. So, the SEC can only stay on the SEC can only stay on top of so much, right? Celsius was probably on their dartboard. And then it blew up, and now it's kind of outside of their hands. Now it's in bankruptcy court, right? What was the SEC going to do? Become a creditor?
I got you. So essentially, there's no reason to even try to pursue
any fine that the SEC collects has to come out of the pockets of victims.
I mean, they could do something maybe post bankruptcy wrap up, like some sort of ban on Alex, like being a
yeah.
But I don't think he's a U.S. citizen. He's born in the Ukraine, raised in Israel, so I don't know where his citizenship is, but I don't think it's U.S.
I doubt it. And yeah, you're right, Alan. They likely will, if they haven't already, and we just haven't heard about it.
Citizenship: Israel and United States.
Israel and the United States.
Yep, dual citizenship.
Well, then, yeah. So then he could have some sort of
barred from trading,
or barred from trading, but then also like officer holding an officer role at a financial company, right?
And keep in mind the civil stuff that's going to come out of this will be biblical. I mean, there's already former employees and executives of the company suing the company, let alone victims.
Maybe
of which there will be a lot of class action stuff, I'm sure.
Maybe that's a good segue into the Three Arrows news of the week, talking about, well, in that case, Joel, where you're talking about employees being unhappy. In this case, Three Arrows Capital was trading their mother's money. So that came out this week in an article where on sort of like the list of creditors that is owed something, not only was it Three Arrows employees who were actually able to deposit a portion of their paycheck into the lending desk of Three Arrows Capitals, their mothers came up as creditors to the whole bankruptcy proceeding. So not only did you lose your own money, you burned your reputation. You're now on the run. Your mom's also pretty unhappy.
It's unbelievable. There's an article that I'll link in the podcast description this week, and I'm going to try to start doing that more often because, like, I have all the articles that we do, and I think people have asked me, "Hey, where'd you get that information from?" So I'll just start posting all the articles so that you guys want to go and look, go for it. But there's one by the New York Magazine that came out really today, and yeah, it came out yesterday, the 15th. And they're probably the most thorough look at Sue and Kyle. And honestly, I was reading it like with my mouth open at some of the things that I saw these guys do, and like that they essentially were failed FX traders. And I say failed because they torched every relationship they had with banks trying to arbitrage those moves to where they got kicked out. They just happened to have it at the same time. So much so it was like, I don't know how New York Magazine surmises this, but Sue's claim was what? Do you remember what Sue became famous?
Super cycle, baby.
Well, yes, but before that, when he first gained notoriety.
No, I don't know.
So for calling the bottom after 2017 is what he like self-proclaimed. I called the bottom, which he was right. Like when it was down near 3,000 or whatever it was. This is before the flash crash. And it lines up exactly with when they were kicked out of their FX trading circles. So it was like they were looking for a new racket, and it was like, the Bitcoin crypto bottom, let's go. And like it turned out to be right. But it was just kind of funny how at the time where they got locked out of FX trading, and I don't know enough about it to speak intelligently on it, but apparently, like the quote in here is, by 2017, when the banks began cutting them off, whenever Three Arrows Capital requested a price, all the bank FX traders were like, fuck these guys, I'm not going to price them. Because essentially, they would take errors in quotes and hold the banks accountable. And that's just like not a generally accepted practice in FX trading. Doesn't really matter. But pretty wild that they went from that to like becoming crypto savants. But I think what's more interesting to me, and I'm going to try to find the article right now, and we'll kind of roll into one of the other implications here. Where is it? Essentially that part of their business strategy was creating a ridiculous persona on Twitter. It was explicit. It was planned. It worked, but it was literally like Sue being like, I'm going to create the super cycle and we're going to talk about blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to talk shit about this, that, and the other. And it was essentially just manipulating people into thinking they were more credible than they were.
I think you're missing the most entertaining aspect of the article, which is during the FX years, Sue was known to trade shirtless in the office. And not only, excuse me, this is not like sitting in his crypto office trading for Three Arrows Capital, where he is like the CEO or co-CEO or however they titled that. This is Correct. Like he had a job before, I believe it was before Deutsche Bank. I can't remember the name. They listed it. So you went to a corporate office, you walked inside, and he would wear shorts in a banking environment and also take his shirt off when he traded. So like, is it that far of a stretch to think the guy who took his shirt off at work and then walked around the lobby, walked around the office, then also went down to 11% body fat and posted shirtless pictures on Twitter and like had this giant like ego persona? Like, is it that far of a stretch? The guy's kind of crazy.
11% body fat, weighing 126 pounds, soaking wet. Like, yeah, when I was 14, I had 11% body fat too. We had the exact same body, my man.
The article also
lift a
quoted,
weight.
article also quoted him as like when he got really serious about his fitness, he got to a point where apparently he was happy and he started calling his trainer fat. He would make fun of his trainer. And it's just like, what a ridiculous person.
Yeah. Yeah. But so by the way, I found the part of the article I want to talk about. In crypto, the only social media platform that counts is Twitter. Many key figures, blah, 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 in what has become a global industry are anonymous or pseudo-anonymous in an unregulated space without legacy institutions, blah, blah, blah. That was the center place. Okay, the point is, Zhu earned his way into an elite upper tier of crypto Twitter. He had a conscious plan to become a Twitter celebrity and entailed tweeting a lot, pandering to the crypto masses with outrageously bullish prognostications, racking up a huge number of followers, and in turn becoming an apex predator on crypto Twitter, profiting at the expense of everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody.
Oh, you did it.
I think everyone knows and agrees that there is a financial benefit to being a personality, not just in crypto. Right. In any, let's just talk financial markets.
No, you're right.
You know, Jim Cramer, he benefits financially from being Jim Cramer, and anyone on CNBC that has, you know, notoriety also benefits. That's part of the game. And he played it really, really well. He's not the only person that has done that on Twitter. Like we sort of, and I think we talked about it maybe 1 episode or 2 episodes ago, we sort of have these like rise and falls of like titans in the crypto industry, and it's all through Twitter. And they're not always super negative, right? But someone's always super hot. And for a time it was Theros Capital, and then it was Do Kwon, and Sam had his time. Arthur Hayes had his time even before that. Like there's always these like rise in a sense that this person is untouchable. They're geniuses. I hope that as an industry, we mature at least a little bit and start to see through some of it. There will always be like in any of those cases, Arthur Hayes obviously was incredibly and is incredibly successful. Go and read his blogs. The guy's not an idiot. Now he made mistakes.
No. I think he's on the circle back. I think he's kind of
I think so too.
Ridiculous as it is, because BitMEX had its issues and BitMEX was ridiculous and dude was a predator, but he had his own sense of morals and like he held to certain things and allowed people to succeed if
he
they
saved cryptocurrency.
Game. I think no doubt. We'll have to talk about that later on. That'll be a whole other topic for another episode because I think a lot of people listening to this don't know that and we'll need to talk about it. However, what I would say is he was kind of outcast with the whole BitMEX fall down and like, you know, they were getting shut down and KYC'd first and all that kind of stuff. And then they were on the run and whatever. He's kind of come full circle where it's like of all the people that had their moment, apart from Sam, like the only 2 dudes that are left who not have been full of shit or just straight up LARPs, which by the way, anecdotally, I didn't know what LARP meant for the longest time.
No, I don't know.
Of course.
I do. Now.
You don't know what it stands for? Live action role play.
Okay.
Live action role play. It's so much funnier whenever I hear the word to be like live action role play. So like everyone else was LARP except for those 2 dudes. Like it's Sam and it's Arthur. And I think everybody else who's kind of risen to crypto notoriety has been fucking full of shit.
I mean, you're right.
It's
sort of actually given me an idea. And so we should get feedback on this. So anyone listening, tell us what you'd think of this idea. What if we did an episode, like an off-week episode or just a segment that was like crypto history? So there's a lot of people that are probably listening that weren't here 4 years ago. Like they don't know Arthur Hayes saved crypto. They're like, wait, what? What do you mean? Like that might be interesting to go into like short 30-minute. We set up the background. We go through the situation, sort of explain when it happened. Some people will be repetitive, but there's a lot of people that weren't here for something like that. They weren't here for
the ETH flash crash to $1.
Yes. On Kraken, right?
Yeah, on GDEX.
GDEX. Oh yeah.
Wait, what?
So there you go. And then Kraken had
when my entire net worth was in ETH.
Kraken had multiple flash crashes.
God.
Another one is like the infamous story of Sam telling what's his name, Coinman Mamba, to sell all of his soul. Like there are a lot of like infamous historical moments that might be cool to be explained. So let us know what you think about that idea.
Dude, I remember watching the Sam and Coin Mama thing and literally thinking it was the baddest ass thing I'd ever seen. It was literally like just telling this dude, because Coin Mama is very well off, usually does very well, like has a good place, and like he publicly shares his positions too, which is what a lot of people don't do.
He took that L. He took that L on the chin though. Like he's definitely
now. I mean, don't you remember? Like for months, he was just salty about it.
Yeah,
he was getting trolled. Now he's like, I would say, taking it pretty well. But there was a time when he was clapping back or trying to clap back on that the whole way up for Sol.
Dude, it went from he was talking shit at $2. It went to $240. Sol's growth. There's no reason to own Sol. As we short sell here, it's going to zero. Sam, sell me all the Sol you want at $2 and go fuck yourself or whatever he said, and fuck off. Unbelievable. It's like seriously one of the greatest moments ever. I like that. I think you know what we should do. We can do it as we record these, and I'll just edit it as like crypto short, and I'll put it as like crypto history short. Publish that right
before we go into it. I would want to like research up on it, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that I remember sort of, but like going back and looking at the details and the timeline and actually laying it out in like, a good way, I think would take prep.
You know what I want to start with? Okay. And then we'll move on because this is seeming to be entertaining. People don't know what we're talking about. I want to talk about God.pdf first.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Oh my God, Joel?
God.pdf? New to me.
Oh wait, okay, I do know what that is. That is the document that explains how to market manipulate crypto, right?
And that was how a lot of your favorite personalities on Twitter made their starting fortune.
Yeah, I do remember that.
And there's like now like very good evidence to support that too, which has been coming out, just as a trickle, which I've been compiling. But we'll get on that too a little bit later. So I want to do a couple updates really quick. We don't have a ton of time left, but anything else you guys want to talk about from a 3AC perspective? I mean, the only other thing that I was going to say was it just talks to their credibility. They own a piece of Deribit, the exchange. And I sent this screenshot to you guys, but there was a time in 2019 they were trying to ship off a piece of it and just like grossly manipulating the value of their own holdings. So the quote here is 3AC had invested in a crypto options exchange called Deribit, and it was selling off a stake. The term sheet set the value of Deribit at $700 million, but some investors noticed the valuation seemed off and discovered its actual valuation was just $280 million. Three Arrows, it turned out, was attempting to flip a portion of its investment at a steep markup, essentially netting the fund an enormous kickback. It was a sketchy thing to do in venture capital, and it blindsided the outside investors. And a quote goes on to say from Nickel Digital Asset Management, who received the pitch, "Since then, I've basically stayed away from them, held them in very low regard, and never wanted to do business with them." So I don't know if that, Alan, you had a feeling on this when I brought it up before, but it's just interesting because I imagine in that world, there's like generally accepted valuation tenets. And it sounds like either one, they were saying, fuck you, we'll just value this however we like. Or two, they were, kind of incompetent or dreamers. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I pushed back on this idea of it being either super nefarious or a data point to look back towards and say, oh, see, they're incompetent. There are plenty of other really good examples of them being incompetent. And so I think this one has the potential to be a little bit like intellectually dishonest and someone just looking for an interesting article that mentions Deribit. So let me explain why. One, there's not enough information in that like short quote that you gave, or even in the article, to say whether what they were doing was nefarious or not. So I'll lay out an example of devil's advocate, how it could not be nefarious. So it said that they were trying to sell the stake for 700 something million, or sorry, at a $700 million valuation. And the current valuation, and I say that in air quotes, was 280 or 270. So an example of where that could be perfectly fine is the last round was conducted at a $270 or $80 million valuation a year ago. And the business has now 4x'd all of the metrics since the last raise. And they're now trying to exit their position on the private market. I don't have a problem with that. When you are trading, in this case, a private market asset, like a position, an equity position in a private company, you get to set the price. Unless there is a public round going on where the company is selling some of the equity, you can, as an investor, as long as, right, it's like not in your terms that you can't sell or the company can veto or something like that, you can go out and try to sell whatever you want for whatever price you want. And in venture capital, I think it is generally understood that you either are or should be or seen as a sophisticated investor base. And so if Three Arrows Capital wants to go out and put out a term sheet for their stake at a $700 million valuation, I don't see a problem with that. Every other venture capital firm can look at it and say, you know what? No, thanks. I'm not interested. But if there's
to protect shareholders, there's also always in these sorts of deals what's called a right of first refusal, that the company and shareholders will be granted the option to exercise, and that prevents the opposite of this happening. It's a good thing for shareholders when a company is valued at 200 million and then someone agrees to buy shares at 400 million. There's complexities that we won't get into that can complicate things, to say the least, and actually can make it not great for shareholders. But in principle, hey, like now the company is worth 400 million, especially if they're selling any sort of a majority stake, even if it is in secondary. But what happens when someone happens to own on paper, 50, equity in a company worth $200 million, and then now they need money for whatever reason because they have to pay for a yacht or whatever, right? Well, what's to stop them from going out to the public market and saying, hey, this company's worth 200 million. I own $10 million worth, but I'll sell it to you at a $50 million valuation, right? I'll sell it to you at a massive discount. The right of first refusal, because I need cash. The right of first refusal kind of protects the company, because anytime a shareholder wants to sell in that sort of situation, the company has the right to take that offer first. So any offer that you put out to some private investor in a secondary round, no less, the company is going to have an option to buy that first. So I'm with Alan on this. We don't know the specificity, the details. I'm sure they were trying to flip equity in companies, especially because they were token fiends. They didn't give a shit about equity. They wanted tokens. The main reason they didn't invest in our business. I pitched Kyle Davies. I had a conversation with him. Multiple conversations with him, and I have feedback for maybe another day, but we didn't have a token. They're not interested when there's no token involved. Deribit was an exception,
dude,
not the rule.
Yeah,
really.
So he just so Joel drops out with the internet, but I would say that is accurate, and they like tokens. They have a lot of equity, is from my understanding, in Deribit, and then also there's one other firm that's sort of very notable. I'm sure they have equity in other companies, but what is it? I'm not going to remember the name off the top of my head. They're looking for liquidity. I don't have a problem with that. I think the article's reaching.
Okay, that's fair. I just found it interesting because it is just like they're finding ways to cast shade on them. Joel's back, by the way. You froze for a minute there, big guy.
Hey, I'm hardwired at 950 Mbps, so y'all take that up somebody else.
So am I, and I have issues too. I have a gig, and it still stuff drops, so it's weird. By the way, the other thing about that article that I think I've noticed, did you see what the name of their yacht was to be called? Because I thought it was hilarious. I had a good
laugh. Wow. and they would put the name on the bow.
Oh, wait, is that true?
Yeah, come on.
Much wow on the bow.
So stupid, man.
Much wow on the bow.
I maintain
Idiots.
that Three Arrows, this whole debacle, which then led to Celsius, Voyager, et cetera, will be our black eye for a decade, at a minimum for a decade. Now, people have short memories. Yeah. It'll go quickly, I suppose. But there's always going to be someone that says, I remember when, or I don't trust crypto because, or I don't trust lending providers because.
Yes.
And that skepticism is healthy. This industry will be better off from all these lending desks getting spanked. They're all going to be good little boys and girls now, and they're going to go out and do actual good, reliable, sustainable deals that require collateral and require reputation that is not just on Twitter, but verified, right? They're going to review balance sheets before providing loans and things like that, as they should have been, and that's good. So we will grow from this, but we'll be a black guy for a long time.
No doubt. I know you guys got to run. I just want to get this one little kind of story update anecdote in here. And we talked about Blackrock, and Alan did a great job of laying out Aladdin, which I got really good feedback on as to what that is. And no one's surprised. I'll post it in the show notes, but Blackrock offering direct private trust to Bitcoin through Coinbase. What's the Pro? What's the old version? Prime. Coinbase Prime. So we have what we conspired would happen, and I think what's his name from Grayscale was super salty about it. So essentially, you're going to get spot tracked, a spot tracked direct private trust to Bitcoin. It doesn't mean you're actually holding spot. There's some weird nuances there. Yeah, I mean, essentially, but there's no. I don't know how they're going to handle the premium. Maybe they're just big enough that they can hold it. So I'll look for more on that. But it was a big article that kind of sent crypto flying. So, boys, I know you got a meeting here in a couple of minutes. This was a good one. We will get Joel's microphone continually to get tweaked in. I think this week was better. Yeah. I think this week was better than last week. So,
thank you. There you go.
All right, let me hit the outro and we'll get out of here. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. I'll post the links in the show description. Follow us on Twitter. We're now available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, and Audible. All 4 that you need. So get us wherever you like. Anyway, boys, appreciate it. Have a good week.